The last echo. The cold wind of Ironholt was a sculptor, carving lines into the mountains and into the faces of those who dared to live among them. Jorn, a warrior of the Iron Guard, felt its bite as a familiar friend, a constant reminder of the hard truths his homeland embraced. He stood on the icy training yard, watching his father, old Gared, demonstrate a sword form. Gared was a legend, a man whose hair was white as the mountain snows, but whose movements were still sharp, precise, deadly. Gared was past 70 years of age. By the natural order, he should have been long in the earth, his body returned to the stone from which it came. But in Stillmera, the first law of magic governed life and death. A parent ceased to age upon the birth of a living biological child, so long as that child remained alive. Jorn was that child. His life, a vibrant coil of muscle and will, kept his father bound to this plane, suspended in an unnatural vigor. This was the way of Thornreach, a stark contrast to the distant lands. In some places, they chased this longevity, breeding endless lines, believing that more children meant more life, more power. They denied the warnings, the subtle costs. But Thornreach understood the third law, the strain chain, the combined number of descendants linked to a chain, added to its strain. Longevity came at a cost. The accumulation of burden heightened susceptibility to illness, emotional instability, and collapse when loss occurred. Thornreach did not fear death. They embraced it as a release from the inevitable weight that came with too many chains. Here, a single heir was the custom, a controlled, deliberate limitation. Jorn watched his father finish the form, the blade a blur. Gared's strength was undeniable, yet Jorn felt a weariness in his own bones, a subtle drag that had no cause in his own life. It was the second law, the burden chain, at work. Enduring fundamental emotional dispositions tended to predispose themselves downward along the chain, from parent to child. Jorn lived with a shadow of his father's 50 years of quiet grief, a low tide of melancholy that rose whenever the old man fell silent. It wasn't a voice, but a weight, a flavor to his days that tasted of old ash. "Good form, old man," Jorn called out, his voice rough. Gared turned, his eyes, though sharp, held the deep, quiet sorrow of centuries. "Old man, am I? You would not be standing here without this old man, boy." The words were a jibe, but they carried a deeper truth. Jorn lived because Gared lived, and Gared lived because Jorn lived. It was a closed circuit of obligation. Later, in the mess hall carved into the mountain's heart, the topic turned, as it often did, to futures. Turan, Jorn's closest friend, clapped him on the back. "So, when are you taking a wife, Jorn?" "My sister has an eye for strong sons. Thornreach needs more strong sons." Turan's sister had already given him a healthy son, keeping Turan's father, a grizzled veteran, firmly bound to the living. Turan was free to live his own life, his father's chain secured. "Perhaps never," Jorn grunted, pushing a piece of stewed meat around his bowl. A silence fell over the table. This was not a casual remark in Thornreach. Heirhood was formally declared, not automatic. Voluntary childlessness and chain severance were respected, if seen as a deep personal sacrifice. To simply never take a wife, to never produce an heir, meant ending the chain. And Jorn was Gared's only one. Old Gared, sitting at the head of the table, put down his ale mug. "You speak foolishness, boy. My line must continue." "Why?" Jorn asked, meeting his father's steady gaze. "So, you can remain in this twilight state for another generation? So another child can bear the weight of your unaging wariness." Gared's face tightened. "It is duty. It is the way of Thornreach. We do not abandon our kin to the swift decay. We hold the line." "And what are the children who hold that line?" Jorn retorted. "I wake up tired, father. Even after a full night's sleep, I feel a grimness that doesn't belong to me. It's the residue of your battles, the echo of your losses. It sits in my chest like cold iron. What if my child feels it heavier? What if they become a shell, worn down by a life not their own?" Gared slammed his fist on the table. "Enough. This talk is weakness. You speak like a soft Aurelian, afraid of their own shadows. Jorn pushed back his chair, the scraping sound loud in the sudden quiet. The Aurelians breathe themselves into madness. They deny the strain until their very minds break. The Lethran numb themselves until they feel nothing at all. We, Father, are supposed to be different. We accept the cost. And I choose to bear the full cost myself. I will not pass this weariness on. He walked out, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Days turned into weeks. Jorn continued his duties, training the new recruits, patrolling the passes. But the chill in the air around him grew colder than the mountain wind. The elders of the clan avoided his gaze. His mother's sisters, old crones who whispered among themselves of ancestral lines and the proper order of things, would sigh loudly whenever he passed. One evening, High Councilman Bryn, a man whose own chain was secured by a granddaughter living in the agrarian fields of Lowthorn, summoned Jorn. Jorn, son of Gared, Bryn began, his voice surprisingly gentle. Your father is a hero. His strength has kept this pass secure for decades. He cannot remain commander forever. We all know this. But his transition must be smooth. His chain must be secured. Jorn looked at the flickering fire. His chain is secure. I am alive. But not for another generation, Bryn pressed. A commander must have an heir, a clear successor not just to his command, but to his very essence. It is the wisdom of Thornreach. The burden must pass, but it must be controlled. One strong heir, prepared, disciplined. Not a multitude, as in the soft lands. Not an absence, which is a severing. I choose to end the line with me, Jorn stated. I will bear Gared's burdens until he takes his rest. Then I will age and die, as is the natural way. There will be no more echoes. Bryn sighed. You speak with honor, Jorn, but also with a young man's idealism. You believe the burden will simply stop with you. You forget. The parent feels the child. The child feels the parent. It flows both ways subtly. And what of your burdens, Jorn? The quiet despair you speak of, the rage from his battles. You will carry it, yes, but it will accumulate. And when you are old and the time for your death comes, that cumulative sorrow will flow back to Gared, who still lives through you. He will feel your exhaustion, your regrets. Do you wish to give him that in his final years? Do you wish to give him your dying agonies? Jorn froze. This was a truth he had not considered. The second law, prolonged suffering tends to weigh upward along the chain, from child to parent. He thought only of stopping the flow downwards. He had forgotten the tide. He had lived with Gared's burdens as a faint hum, a shadow. But his own life, full of its own trials and sorrows, would add to that weight. If he died childless, all that accumulated sorrow, his own and his father's echoes, would flood back to Gared in his final years, a wave of despair. What do you propose? Jorn asked, his voice barely a whisper. A wife, Bryn said. A child. One. To break the cycle of accumulated sorrow. To draw off the burdens, old and new. To give Gared a peaceful end when his time comes, unburdened by your passing. It is the purpose of our limitation. Not to escape the chain, but to manage it. To make it bearable for all. Jorn spent the rest of the night walking the high battlements, the wind tearing at his cloak. He looked out at the vast, silent expanse of Stillmera. Other lands chased eternity, or denied their feelings. Thornreach lived with open eyes, accepting the harsh calculus of their magical reality. He had wanted to end the chain to protect a future generation from himself, from his father's echoes. But in doing so, he would condemn his father to a bitter, painful final accounting. The next morning, Jorn sought out Gared. His father sat by the hearth, polishing his sword. He looked tired, his gaze distant. Father, Jorn said. Gared looked up. Have you come to apologize for your insolence? No, Jorn said. I have come to understand. I will take a wife. I will have an heir. One. To bear my burdens forward, and to ease yours in the end. Gared looked at him for a long moment, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. He said nothing, simply nodded. That evening, Jorn sought out Turan's sister. Her name was Lyra, and her eyes, like her brother's, were strong and clear. "Lyra," Jorn said, "I wish to court you, to take you as my wife, to have a child. One." Lyra looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "And what of this child, Jorn, son of Gared? What burden will it bear?" "It will bear our hope," Jorn said, the words feeling new and strange on his tongue. "And it will be disciplined. It will be taught the truths of Thornreach, to know the weight of the chain and how to carry it with honor." Lyra nodded slowly. "Then let us begin. For the future of Thornreach depends not on endless life, but on honorable death. And a chain, however short, must be strong enough to guide the old ones home." Jorn looked out at the setting sun, painting the mountains in hues of blood and fire. The burden was still there, a quiet ghost in his blood, but now there was a different kind of purpose to it. A quiet strength, forged in the acceptance of what was and what had to be. This was the true magic of Thornreach, not to escape the laws of Stillmera, but to live by them, with integrity, with choice, and with the heavy, unyielding grace of the stone itself.